Rain shouldn't sound like footsteps, but that night it did, and Lily Harper would later swear she heard the storm walk up to her door before the man ever knocked. Long before she knew the soaked stranger outside wasn't just a stranded cowboy, but a man the entire country had been searching for. A father running from a world powerful enough to take his son away. The rain pounded the tin roof of her roadside cottage so hard it felt like gravel poured from the sky, the kind of storm that erased roads, swallowed headlights, and convinced sensible people to stay exactly where they were, which is why Lily knew, with a strange certainty, that whoever stood outside her door right now was either lost beyond reason or desperate beyond pride. And when the first knock came, soft, slow, almost polite, she froze with a chipped mug halfway to her lips, listening as the sound blended into the roar of water until she wondered if she had imagined it. But then it came again, 3 careful taps that did not belong to wind or loose shutters. And Lily felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came every time the world tried to intrude on the quiet she had built around herself since her mother passed, and the highway was rerouted miles away, turning her once busy roadside stop into a forgotten speck of wood and tin on the edge of nowhere. She stood slowly, reaching for the old baseball bat she kept by the door, her bare feet silent on the worn floorboards as lightning flashed through the thin curtains and through the shadow of a tall figure across the glass. And for a brief, irrational moment, she considered pretending she wasn't home, letting the stranger believe the cottage was abandoned like everything else on this road. But the knock came a third time, weaker now, and something about it, something small and tired and almost ashamed, made her pull the curtain back just enough to see through the blur of rain. A man stood on her porch wearing a dark cowboy hat and a long coat soaked nearly black, water dripping from the brim in steady lines, and beside him, half hidden under his arm, was a boy wrapped in a thin gray blanket that clung uselessly to his shoulders. The child's head bowed, lips pale, eyes half closed like he had reached the edge of whatever strength he had left, and behind them in the mud sat an old pickup truck at an awkward angle with the hood slightly raised and steam curling up into the rain like a dying breath. Lily's grip tightened on the bat as she studied them, searching for the sharpness she had learned to recognize in men who meant trouble. But the man didn't pound on the door or shout for help. He just stood there waiting as if he had already prepared himself to be turned away. And when lightning lit his face for a split second, she saw not anger, not arrogance, but exhaustion carved deep into his features, and something else she couldn't name yet. Fear, maybe, or grief, or both tangled together. She unlocked the door before she could change her mind and pulled it open just enough to speak over the rain. And the man stepped forward slightly, careful not to cross the threshold without permission, his voice low and rough when he said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you." The truck gave out a mile back. "We've been walking. I just need somewhere warm for the boy for a few hours. I can pay." And Lily glanced down at the child again, at the way his fingers clutched the man's coat like he was afraid of being separated even for a second. And she didn't think about money or safety or the 100 reasons she should say no to strangers on storm nights. She just stepped back and said, "Get inside before he passes out." And the wind shoved rain across her floor as they entered, bringing the storm in with them. And she shut the door hard against it, sliding the bolt into place, while the roar outside softened into a distant, angry hiss against the walls. The man removed his hat immediately, water spilling onto the floor, and Lily noticed the way he moved, careful, respectful of her small space, guiding the boy toward the fire without needing to be told, kneeling to unwrap the soaked blanket and rub warmth back into the child's hands with slow, steady motions like he had done this before, like he knew exactly how close to danger the boy had been. And Lily hurried to throw another log on the fire, grabbing the only dry quilt she owned from her bed and wrapping it around the boy's shoulders while he blinked up at her with startlingly bright eyes that did not match his trembling body. "Thank you, miss," the boy whispered with soft, careful manners that didn't fit the image of roadside breakdowns and muddy boots. And Lily felt a small ache in her chest at the sound of it as she moved to the stove and poured water into a pot for soup, asking without turning around, "How long you been out there?" To which the man replied after a pause, "Too long." And there was something in the way he said it that made Lily glance back at him, because it didn't sound like a complaint, it sounded like a confession. She watched as he helped the boy closer to the fire, his large hands gentle and deliberate, his eyes never leaving the child for more than a second. And she noticed things without meaning to. The quality of his boots beneath the mud, the expensive stitching on his coat now hidden by rain, the way he spoke without slang or rough edges despite his appearance, and the way the boy sat up straighter as warmth returned to him, thanking her again and again in that same careful tone as if he had been taught gratitude like a lesson in school. Lily handed them both bowls of thin soup and a piece of bread each, apologizing for how little she had. But the boy ate like it was a feast while the man barely touched his food, watching the child with a focus so intense it made her feel like she was witnessing something private and sacred, the kind of silent devotion you don't often see unless someone is afraid of losing what they love most. And outside the rain continued its relentless assault on the roof while inside the small cottage filled slowly with the unfamiliar warmth of other people breathing, shifting, existing in the space that had been too quiet for too long. And Lily realized with a strange, unsettling awareness that this night, this knock, this soaked stranger and his shivering son had already changed something she couldn't quite name. Because for the first time in years the storm outside did not feel like the loudest thing in her world. Morning came quiet and gray. The storm reduced to a thin mist that clung to the trees and turned the road into slick mud. And Lily woke to the soft clink of a mug and the gentle shift of firewood before she even opened her eyes. Instantly aware, she wasn't alone in the cottage. When she stepped into the kitchen, she found Caleb already awake, feeding the fire and moving carefully around her small space like he had lived there for years. His hat and coat hung neatly by the door, his boots set aside to dry, and Evan still asleep under her quilt on the couch with one hand gripping the fabric like it might disappear if he let go. "Morning," Caleb said quietly, and Lily noticed the pot of real coffee simmering on the stove, stronger than anything she ever made for herself. And the simple kindness of it unsettled her more than the knock from the night before. After breakfast, Caleb went outside without being asked and began fixing the fence that had leaned for months along her yard, lifting posts, tying wire, working with steady precision, and Lily watched through the window feeling a strange mix of gratitude and embarrassment that a stranger was repairing what she had been too tired to handle alone. Evan followed her to the chicken coop, laughing when a hen flapped at him, and the sound filled the yard with a warmth Lily hadn't heard in years, a reminder of how loud life could be when it wasn't just her and the wind. As the hours passed, she noticed more things she couldn't ignore. The way Caleb spoke, educated, measured, nothing like a drifter. The way his eyes constantly scanned the road and tree line, as if expecting someone to appear, and the way Evan never wandered more than a few steps from him, always checking to make sure Caleb was still within reach. These two weren't just stranded. They were hiding. By afternoon the rain had stopped completely, and the road, while messy, was passable, which meant they should have been preparing to leave, but Lily found herself inventing reasons to delay, offering more food, mentioning how soft the ground still was, suggesting the truck needed more time before being checked. And Caleb watched her with a look that said he knew she was stretching the truth, yet he didn't challenge it. "We can wait another day," he said simply, as if he was just as willing to postpone whatever waited for them beyond her yard. That evening they sat by the fire, Evan asking curious questions about her garden and chickens while Lily talked more than she had in months, telling stories she didn't realize she still carried. And Caleb listened quietly, his expression softening each time Evan laughed. And for a while Lily forgot to be suspicious, forgot to wonder what they were running from, because the warmth in the room felt too real to question. Later that night, as she passed the couch, she heard Evan mumbling in his sleep again, and this time the words were clear enough to make her stop cold. "Don't let them take me back," he whispered, and Lily turned to see Caleb already awake in the chair by the window, eyes open in the dark like he had been waiting for those words, his posture tense and alert as if danger could step through the door at any moment. In that instant, Lily understood something that made her chest tighten. This wasn't just a broken truck and bad weather. This was a father guarding his son from something powerful enough to haunt the child's dreams. The next morning dawned bright and still, the sky completely clear, and Lily knew she had run out of excuses because the road was dry enough now and daylight pushed travelers forward. Yet when Caleb began quietly gathering their things, Evan's shoulders slumped in a way that made Lily's heart ache. And before she could stop herself, she said, "The road's still soft. You might get stuck worse than before. Better wait till afternoon." And Caleb looked at her for a long moment, eyes searching her face like he was trying to understand why a woman who barely knew them was trying so hard to keep them there. Then he nodded. "All right," he said, and Evan smiled with a relief so genuine it made Lily turn away quickly so they wouldn't see how much that smile affected her, because she was beginning to realize something she hadn't expected at all. The quiet she had protected for so long no longer felt like safety. It felt like loneliness, and these two strangers had somehow made her small, forgotten cottage feel like a place worth staying in. By midday, the quiet road that hadn't seen more than a handful of cars in months filled with the low hum of engines. And Lily felt the sound before she saw it. A vibration in the air that made Caleb's head snap toward the window, and his entire posture change in an instant. The calm, careful man she had known for 2 days replaced by someone alert, guarded, and ready. 2 black SUVs rolled slowly into her yard and stopped with deliberate precision, tires sinking slightly into the soft dirt, and men in dark suits stepped out like they already knew exactly who they would find there. "Take Evan inside," Caleb said quietly, but Evan had already grabbed Lily's hand, his small fingers tightening with fear as the men approached. One of them spoke in a calm, rehearsed tone. "Mr. Carter, we've been looking for you." Lily's breath caught. "Carter?" The man removed his hat, rain-dried hair falling across a face she suddenly recognized from magazine covers and news stories she had glanced at in grocery lines years ago. Caleb Carter, the missing billionaire. The father locked in a public legal battle after his wife's death. The man who had vanished with his son. The world thought he had disappeared. He hadn't. He had run. The suited man continued. "The court has ruled. Evan must be returned to the estate." Evan pressed himself into Lily's side, shaking. Caleb stepped forward, voice firm. "He's not going back there." Lily didn't think. She stepped in front of him. "He's a good father," she said loudly, her voice carrying farther than she expected. "I've seen it. You want to take that boy? You explain to everyone watching why you're dragging him away from the only person he trusts." Neighbors, drawn by the vehicles, had begun to gather at the edge of the property. Phones came out. Eyes watched. This was no longer quiet. This was public. The men hesitated. This wasn't how they planned it. After a long, tense pause, the lead man nodded once. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Carter." And just like that, they left. Silence returned slowly. Lily turned to Caleb, still trying to process what she had just done. "You're that Caleb Carter?" He nodded. "I didn't want you to treat me different." She let out a shaky breath. "You fixed my fence, fed my chickens, slept on my couch. I don't even own a TV." For the first time, he smiled, not the polished smile from photographs, but a tired, grateful one. Evan looked up at her with hopeful eyes. "Can we stay one more night?" Lily looked around her small cottage, the place that had felt too quiet for too long, then back at the father and son who had filled it with life in just 2 days. "Stay as long as you need," she said softly. And as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds and warmed the yard, Lily realized the truth that left her speechless. The lonely girl who thought she had nothing to offer the world had just become the safest place in it for someone who had everything money could buy, and the one thing he couldn't live without.